there is some other Canucks stuff to talk about. Like, obviously, besides outside of COVID, like there are a few other things. The big one being right now that there has been rumors of the Canucks being interested in potentially trading Jaroslav Halak. That has been coming up because the Canucks are in. I don't know if you're aware of this, but the Canucks, the Canucks that Jim Rutherford inherited from a certain other GM.
Certain, you can't even say the name.
No. Why should
that
I?
era is
Why should
over
I?
and
Why
done
should
with.
I? Why should I give him? Why should I say that name? It just
Yeah,
makes me. It
that
just
just
makes
gives
me
him
cringe.
credit.
It just makes me cringe.
Fair
We're
enough.
left in Cap Hill, and
what a good statement and what a true statement.
yeah, exactly.
It's accurate.
Yeah, they left entirely in Cap Hill. And one of the issues coming up right now is the fact that Jaroslav Halak who currently has a cap hit on the team of 1.5 million, is nearing his performance bonus achievement, which is that essentially that if he plays 10 games in his contract, if he plays 10 games, the Canucks have to pay him an additional 1.25 million. I believe is the correct number. Now,
that's not a lot. It's
not a lot of money, really. In like, if it were just about the actual cash itself, like, who cares?
Yeah.
But the problem is that also factors into the cap hit.
Yeah.
And the Canucks, as they are right now,
have no cap.
Do not have the cap hit to take that. So what happens in that case is that any money that you are over, you're allowed to be 7% over the cap, which wouldn't be
it wouldn't bring us over that.
It wouldn't bring us over that. But the thing is that when you go over the cap, regardless of how much percentage it's by, you have to, that comes out of next year's bill instead. So it's a cap. You basically get a recapture penalty of 1.25 million next year. So the Canucks are in a position where he has played 8 games because it's not starts. It is any game, anytime.
So anytime you had to come in for Demko.
Yeah, which has only been once this year. He's only had to come play in relief once.
That was when we got actually embarrassed. But
yeah,
that's we're not going to talk about that.
But that was in the before time. The
before time.
Yeah, the before Boudreau era. And the Canucks are in a spot now where they kind of have to look at the idea of trading him, because they can't have that on their books next year. They just can't.
Yeah.
They cannot have another 1.2. They can't have 1.25 million going to someone who's no longer on their team.
Exactly. Because he's not going to be here after this year.
No, 100% no. And as much as I like Halak, I love Halak actually as a backup goaltender. Like, he's been getting, it started rough for him.
Yeah.
But he's gotten he's improved a lot. His numbers are actually quite good. If you look at his numbers during his Canucks games, he's just had the misfortune of playing in a few of the games where the Canucks have not been scoring, and he has gotten very little run support in a lot of those games. Like the last game against the Kings is the only Canucks loss of the Bruce Boudreau era in that shootout, and he had 30-something saves. Like, he was the only reason they got to a shootout at all. He was fantastic in that game.
Yeah, they couldn't score goals for him.
No. And with Halak, there's been the discussion of, well, he's probably one of the guys that you actually can get some trade value for. And I actually went and explored that in a Canucks Army article, because I was interested to see what kind of returns and what teams would actually be interested in picking up, because goaltending is often a very set in stone deal.
That's true.
And it was, my editor, David Quadrelli, he basically was like, hey, can you look into this? And I'm like, yeah, sure. And I
just give a subtle shout out to Quads there.
Of course I do. Of course, friend of the show, Quads. Skating buddy, Quads. I looked into it, and I kind of brought in a few teams. I brought 3 teams to the table. The big issue with Halak, and why it's going to be very hard to trade him, is because thanks to the just great negotiating power of the last guy,
the past era.
Yeah, he not only does he have that massive performance bonus, he also has a no move clause, a full no move clause. So you are basically stuck. He holds the hammer. Any deal Halak doesn't want, he can say no to, essentially.
Lovely.
And the way that the Canucks, and obviously the way the things are going for the Canucks, like you can't play Demko forever.
No.
Like eventually you're gonna have to go to a backup to give him a night off.
Especially if they're in the playoff hunt, because if he plays pretty much every game until playoffs and they make the
You've cooked
playoffs,
him.
he's so burnt out that he's not going to be good and they're just going to flop because he honestly is what
He's
like now well
not as much anymore,
now-
but like yeah, for
but
sure.
he definitely holds the team together.
Yeah, no. If Halak or Demko, sorry, is not like is not healthy, like and cannot play at the same pace that he is, the Canucks are going to be in trouble because they are very much a team that, with the way that their defense is, they're reliant on their goaltender to be as good as possible every single night.
Yeah.
So the way I'm looking at it from the Canucks perspective is, okay, if you trade Halak, it's got to be quick. Like it's got to be sooner rather than later. And
Yeah.
frankly, that's the best way to do it, even if there was no performance bonus to look at in any
That's
case.
true.
Because
Deadline's always harder to move players.
it is, yes, exactly. It is always harder to move players at the trade deadline because that's when everybody's trying to move players.
Exactly.
And sometimes that means there are going to be better players available. Like in Halak's case, like Halak is a very good goaltender, like has name recognition, but he's 36. He's an older guy. There's going to be other options out there, other younger, better options out there at the trade deadline itself that you can't risk trying to sell Halak around that time too, because it's going to diminish his value. If you right now you have time on your side in that sense that if you get something done soon, you could theoretically have it figured out, like have that dealt before the trade deadline even becomes an issue.
Yeah, that makes sense.
And then another team's on the hook to pay that money, right?
Yeah.
So but obviously that's the other thing. Like, well, any team that's bringing him in is basically guaranteeing they're going to have to pay $3 million because they're going to play him twice in the next 50 something games or like 45 games, right?
Yeah.
They're going to play him twice.
So it needs to be a team that has enough cap space to afford that, but also can take on a goaltender and where Halak would want to go.
Yeah.
There's so many factors.
Either that or a team that is desperate enough for goaltending help and believes that they're close enough to a Stanley Cup that they need a bona fide goaltender now and they don't care what money that costs, kind of thing, at no expense kind of thing, where like they're like, oh yeah, cap penalty next year, that's fine. And they do it anyway.
Do you think the Oilers would? Just out of curiosity, because the Oilers have never had goaltending. I feel like, and they still don't have goaltending, but they have like they don't. Their defense isn't great, but they have the scores to get them.
Yes, I think the Oilers. So I think everybody was saying the Oilers, like that was the main one, because particularly because there was the whole thing this week where Mike Smith has been terrible. Mikko Koskinen has been terrible. And then Mikko Koskinen basically went on to talked to like on a Finnish newspaper. And
I saw something about
it's
that.
not, and basically was like, I don't think it's fair that I'm getting blamed. I can't score goals, which on one hand I
fair,
get, but with one hand totally fair. But also, you were bad in those games. You didn't help them.
It's you're not Thatcher Demko.
It's not like with Demko where you're stealing the show
and keeps them in them,
and you're still losing.
Yeah.
You are just as bad as your non-scoring teammates, so you don't get to complain. You are just as bad. Like
if this were Demko and he talked to a paper, he has every right to complain because he makes like 40 saves a game and the Canucks just can't score for him. Well, that in the past era, but but like Koskinen has only made like 20 saves a game, hasn't been very good. And so you can't just leave it up to your teammates to score like 7 goals a game and get by giving up 5 goals. It doesn't work like that.
And in particular, the funniest part is the game that he's referring to is one against the Rangers where he literally gave the puck behind the net to a Ranger and
I remember
Ranger
that.
put it in the empty net.
Yeah.
Because it's like, yeah, no, you don't get to complain. Like
you did that.
Your coach was mad for like your coach definitely should have blamed your lack of scoring as well, but it's still your fault that they ended up tied. Like you were at like the nearing like regulation. Like, come on.
That interview was so good. It was very funny.
I appreciate the goss.
He really was like honest with the media and was like, yeah, our goaltending sucked pretty much.
But then he walked it back and it was
like you should have just left it there. And I think a lot of people would have appreciated it a lot more for what it was than you backfiring and be like, oh, never mind, or try to cover it up or make it better. But no.
Yeah, it was a whole deal. Anyway, the Oilers are one of those teams that is so desperate to get to the playoffs because of how disastrous this season has how disastrous the era has been for them and how badly they're playing now. And despite having literally 2 of the top 3 players in the entire world on their team right now, that's unacceptable. You should be making the playoffs every single year and being the best team out there and crushing everybody in your path. And you're not able to do that partially because you're not building a team around them at all. You haven't built a team. You have built them a bunch of anchors that they have to pull that they have to pull a rock up a hill and hope it goes well. And the Mike Smith and Mikko Koskinen are as a tandem. I think anyone could have told you was a mistake to go back to again, and they did it anyway. And now it's really coming back to bite them. I think Edmonton is desperate enough that they might give it a try. But I think out of any team, that is the one that Halak would be like, no, I'm not playing. I'm not taking a trade to Edmonton.
Because Edmonton would screw him over.
Well, it's not even that. It's just that if you have the power to move yourself to any team in the league,
why would you go to Edmonton?
Why would you go to, let alone Edmonton? Why, not even just to take not even I'm not going to
not even the city, but
I'm talking about why would you go to the team that consistently underperforms, consistently has some of the most pressure and puts you in the worst spots possible.
When you play in front of when you're backing when you're goaltending a player on the team McDavid plays on, that adds a whole element of pressure because he is so good. And Draisaitl too, where you feel like you have to be so good so then they can give those guys a chance, especially.
Yeah, it's not a real win-win situation for you. Whereas the other 2 teams that I talked about in that article that I think in particular are actually more likely to go for it, to get a deal done with. Then this is not based on intel or anything. This is just based on my own kind of taking a look at the teams around the league.
Yeah.
I would say one team to look at, the main team to look at is Vegas, and the other one is Colorado. The reason I say those 2 in particular is because in Vegas's case, they're in a team. They might be in the lead in their division, but the goaltending has been not good for them.
No.
It's been okay, but not good enough.
Yeah.
Robin Lehner has not done as well this year as I think they were hoping, especially after trading Fleury.
Oh yeah.
And Laurent Brossoit has not been decent enough as a backup.
No.
And
they need Halak to be a backup. They
need Halak to be a 1B, which he can be, I think. In the right situation, I think 100%. He could be. I think in the Canucks case, he's in a spot where the defense isn't good enough for him to be a 1B.
Vegas has a good defense, though.
Vegas has a very good defense, exactly. So I think the thing is here, right? The main issue with Vegas, of course, is that they don't have any cap space at all. If the Canucks don't have cap space, the Knights don't have cap space, and then some.
Especially because of the Eichel deal, because he's not even hitting the cap yet. But as soon as he steps on that ice, that cap is
$10 million.
Is $10 million less.
The Knights already have to find a way to get rid of $10 million off their books, which sounds like that would make Halak. That's impossible. They're not going to take Halak on for that case. The thing that I think is why I think they would go for it anyway is because I think the Knights, if there's one thing that they've shown over the last 5 years of their existence, it's that they will do anything to go for it, and they will look at every situation as we can have our cake and eat it too. I see them,
absolutely.
When they I always go back to the Pietrangelo thing, where they basically had it signed. They had that contract with him already signed and delivered before they had made a trade, knowing full well that was going to mean that they were going to have to take a loss trading somebody else just to free up the space for him, which ended up being the Canucks taking on Nate Schmidt.
Who would you get rid of if Vegas were to take on Jaroslav Halak and then Jack Eichel comes back and for cap space?
Well,
who would for just looking at Halak then who would you trade then or how would you free up cap space if you were the Knights?
Well, say if I'm Jim Rutherford here, because you're trying to you're going to try to hold him a little bit to the fire a bit here, not too much because you do need to get Halak moved. I think Halak would be happy to go to Vegas. I think he would love. I think Vegas that's
absolutely.
So the immediate starting point is you're taking back Brossoit, which means that you're taking on a not as good goaltender who is technically right now has a higher cap hit than Halak because he's making 2 million, but year over year, that's less than the close to 3 million that he'd get if you had to give the performance bonus.
True.
So there probably still have to be a case where somebody on your taxi squad or something has to get dropped back down or something like that, like a higher paid player, maybe like Travis Hamonic kind of seems like the odd man out at this point. Maybe that's where
I don't mind that though.
Yeah, I don't think a lot of people do at this point, but like that's what has to happen essentially to bring in Brossoit, and for 2 years at a guy without a no trade clause, in theory, you could probably flip him to somebody else if you wanted to after.
Yeah, even before trade deadline, depending when you get the deal done.
Heck, you could even send him to the AHL, bring up Mikey DiPietro or Silovs if you wanted to instead.
I would almost prefer that in a way because yes, I feel like DiPietro. I feel like they would move up Silva.
I think Silovs, yeah.
Yeah, I feel like they would move him up first, but it depends, right? But also that gives them the experience of being in the AHL, but you'd have to look at their development
if you
down
they're good enough to be a regular backup because
you'd have to look at their development and
starts.
You'd have to look at their development and see if they're even ready to be able to do that.
Yeah, and I know Cody has talked about before that he's not liked what he's seen from Mikey DiPietro this year. It's been a rough year for him.
Yeah, I don't think he would come up.
Has fared a bit better.
Yeah.
But either way, it's a question of do you feel they're NHL ready to play regular NHL games, because you'd still have to do that as a backup to Demko because he can't play every game.
That's true.
So I think immediately you start off with like that. It's the Brossoit for Halak. It is much easier to deal a Laurent Brossoit elsewhere if you have to than it is with Halak because of Halak's no move and everything else that comes with it.
Yeah.
And in particular when it comes to next year, so because he would still have one more year on his contract, whereas Halak has obviously done it this year. The thing is, the Knights, to make that money work, would still have to send you another guy, and that's where it gets interesting because they have a lot of guys who don't make an insane amount of money in the bottom line, who could be very decent.
Wait, you looking at forwards or defense?
Forwards in particular, because I think their defense. I know exactly who you were thinking of. Absolutely no Ben Hutton.
But why not?
Because he's not good enough.
He's not that bad.
He's not good enough.
He's not that.
But you could get more. You could get more for Halak. Let's put it that way. You could get more for Halak than a second go around with Ben Hutton.
Let's be honest though. Ben Hutton is a world better than Tucker Pullman.
I mean but that's like okay, but that's like
I had to bring that up because honestly, like when you look at our defense and Tucker Pullman being a starter on the defense,
like saying
Ben Hutton is better.
That's like being proud of a snail for being faster than a turtle. That's nothing. That means nothing.
I will defend Hutton till the grave.
I know
I will always defend him.
He's fine, but he's okay. But you could get more for you in this particular scenario. You could get more for Halak.
That's true.
And I think the way that you look at what the Knights have to offer, especially once you factor in the cost of everything, I think you could, especially with the fact that Ben Hutton's 28.
That's true.
There are much younger options available to you that you could go after. I look at a guy maybe this is a hard sell, but if you wanted a defenseman, maybe you look at a guy I don't know, Zach Whitecloud, that would bring in money next year. And
he's also young and he's also developing to be a really good NHL defenseman.
Now, that is very much dreaming big and probably very, very, very unlikely. So I wouldn't say that's my main call, but I would look at frankly, I'm looking at the case of okay, they have, maybe you could bring in something like a Nicholas Waugh or something who's making $750 a year.
So they're not big cap hits and they're also decent players.
You don't need to bring the thing with this particular trade is you don't need to bring in a star. You just need some younger guys who can come in and maybe chip away a little bit. And the Knights do have a large glut of players who are on the younger side and have shown that they can contribute at the NHL level on a regular basis. Because the Knights seem to be very, very good at finding those guys.
They're good at almost developing guys.
Yeah. And so I look at this as a case of where they could easily do that, where they could easily, or the Canucks could easily get a young prospect or or maybe not a prospect, but a younger player and Laurent Brossoit out of this deal. Brossoit is kind of just the throw in, because you have to.
Yeah, you have to because you need another goaltender.
The real meal ticket is that extra guy, and you get rid of the cap, and you getting rid of the Halak,
cap hit,
the Halak bonus, and everything with it. And I think you could get that done. And I look at again. I think with the Knights, like they very much would look at it as a case of our goaltending isn't good enough. We've gone 100% all in this year. We're already going to have to dump a bunch of guys the second Jack Eichel comes back, or the second we're close to getting Jack Eichel back for very little. So we better make sure we have goaltending that can back it up, because we're going to lose some depth guys pretty quickly here.
True. So, and Halak can be that depth backup guy.
Yeah, because the way the Knights are playing right now, the second you bring in Eichel and have to get rid of some really good guys to bring him in, because they're going to lose.
Yeah.
They're going to, like, here's straight up, they're going to lose they're going to lose probably at least 2 of, like, William Karlsson, Jonathan Marchessault, Riley Smith, Dadonov, Pietrangelo, Theodore, McNabb, one of those guys.
They're going to lose 1 or 2.
Lose 2, probably 2.
Yeah.
And that's not even including the fact that, like, Max Pacioretty as well. Like, Max Pacioretty, you probably
he could be an almost easier one to lose because he's older, but still it's a big hit.
Alec Martinez, same thing. Like, there's a lot of guys like big name guys who you're probably going to lose to close for next to nothing
because they're older and because you need to make room for Eichel.
Right. So you're already going to have that problem. So you better hope your goaltending is good enough to get you through with the suddenly not as strong forward core, or not as deep forward core. So I think that they're a team to keep an eye on. The other one is Colorado, because their goaltending has been abysmal this year.
I feel like they got Gruber hasn't been great with Colorado, but I feel like they got
atrocious.
I feel like
got lucky. They kind of got lucky.
They got lucky in that way, but also the guys they have that they thought were going to be better than they are have not been good.
Yeah, the
reason they're decent is because of Nathan McKinnon and Gabe Landeskog and Mika Rantanen and all the depth guys they have up front and on the defense. That's the only reason they're good. And they're not even that good.
The second they signed, the replacement was Darcy Kemper. For me,
that was bad.
Here's the thing. It's not bad on the surface, because Darcy Kemper, I think, is a really good goaltender. He's underrated.
It just doesn't work.
The problem is that he was the only guy they signed. And the way that if there's one thing that's been a huge issue for the Avalanche over the last however many years, is that their goaltenders get hurt all the time. And Darcy Kemper gets hurt.
He
regularly.
Has the worst
he has
history of
very
injuries.
Bad injury luck. You are guaranteed to have a deal with at least one Darcy Kemper injury a year. And that's not good. That's not great, especially when you've already had a history of running out of goaltenders. Like the year that the bubble season, I think they 100% would have probably gotten to the cup final had it not been that they ended up going down to Michael Hutchison by the second round against Dallas.
Literally.
Like they literally were on their 4th goaltender.
It
might even be 5th. Like they
brought a lot of goaltenders literally to the bubble for this reason.
Francouz got hurt.
Not
Pickard. The other
I forget his name.
The other guy. There was there were more.
The other young guy also got hurt, who was their 3rd string goaltender.
Yeah.
And then
Hunter Miska, I think, was also in there. I think that might have been
Michael Hutchison.
And then Hutchison. And it's like, well, of course they lost. They were down to their 4th goaltender, who wasn't very good.
5th.
Who was having to do a whole lot more than
he prepares to or should have.
Yeah. And so the Avalanche are a team that definitely needs it, and their backup situation has been rough. Like Pavel Francouz has only played 1 game all year, and the 1 game he played, he had an .882.
I feel for Francouz though, because he's good. Like he's a decent goaltender. I think this season has been rough.
He's 31.
Like, he's older.
I don't.
He also has spent his whole career in the AHL, has he not?
Yeah.
So
I keep thinking like, in a few years
he was good for 1 year, and now he's not.
Francouz is going to be pretty good, but then I remember, he's actually 30. This is probably as good as he's gonna be. Like not the 82. I think he's a little better than that. That's
true.
A bit of a weird one, especially considering it's 1 game. So I'm kind of like wondering what the deal is there.
True.
It's just it appears to be just an ankle issue for him or of some kind. But if you're the Avalanche, you absolutely need some goaltending help. And Halak might be your guy there. I think Halak's pretty durable. Like I don't think he gets hurt pretty often.
No.
Or at least not in the last few years. Maybe when he was starting regularly, but
like Vegas, Colorado has a really good defense that can help him out and back him up, unlike the Canucks do.
Yeah. It is a case of he 100%, it's one of for Colorado, I think they would be an easier team to get a deal done with because they have more cap room.
Oh yeah.
Not a lot more, but a little bit.
But they have a little bit more, and they're not in the crunch Vegas is in the way of waiting for Eichel to come back and having to then move more players. Like, I feel like
exactly
Colorado can take, like, they have enough cap space, and then they don't also have to worry about down the road clearing more cap space.
Yeah, they're in a spot where they can move around.
Yeah.
They can move some money around and not have to worry about, say, trading the farm to get bring in goaltending help.
Yeah.
But the Canucks would still be in a spot where they could definitely take a guy to make the money, where they would still have to be like, okay, well, I'll take a guy to make the money.
I was going to ask you, because I was going to be like, do you think this would be a 1-for-1, or who would you take as well with Francois?
You're taking Francouz, who is only on his last year. So then
you can just get another goalie for next year.
And then you're off the hook there. Great.
Exactly.
Perfect. Bingo. Then the other one is to make the money work. You maybe look at, like, you're obviously not going to get there's a lot of defense. Like, there's a lot of good defensemen that the Avs have, but they're not
like Erik Johnson and Samuel Girard and
Bowen Byram. If they want to give us
Cale Makar.
I'll
take Cale Makar.
Yeah, you know what? If they want to give us Cale Makar,
I'll take Cale Makar
by all means.
And Bowen Byram, I'll take those.
You know, right defenseman, he'd fit quite well next.
He'd be great. Oh, what a pairing!
Cale Makar.
Can you imagine? That would be a dream come true.
I don't think the Canucks.
We would have to trade so many players for them to happen.
I mean, the Canucks would never win 5 straight Stanley Cups with that defense.
Yes,
I think you can, but I think in the Avs case, they're also like they're in a spot where they're almost maybe even more all in than the Knights are, because of the
100%.
fact that a lot of their guys like Nazem Kadri. And I believe there's a few of them. There's like a lot of guys who are like expired contracts coming up this year.
And a lot of the guys are getting older too.
Yeah, Burakovsky's coming up. Nichushkin comes up. They have a lot of guys who are going to be UFAs next year. And Ryan Murray is going to be a UFA. Jack Johnson, but you don't want Jack Johnson.
We don't want Jack Johnson. That would be just another Tucker Pullman on the team, and I'm not about to have that.
Yeah, it's one of those. Yeah. So with the Avs, they're a case where, like, you're definitely taking a younger guy, like a prospect who's still in, like, either the AHL or in junior, and they have plenty of those guys.
And that's not even like, that would be actually a good thing for the Canucks in a way. They send them to the AHL and then move some guys, whatever, and then that player can be a guy for them down the road next year or the year after, depending on the development and where he's at.
Yeah. In theory, you could get a guy who's already kind of close, like where the cake's almost baked already, kind of.
Yeah,
thing.
So like an AHL guy who's scratching at the door cusp, to come in. Yeah,
like more like a Jack Rathbone almost, like where he's like just about there, like he's just about ready to
who's
go.
Maybe played a couple NHL games.
He's just not ready to crack the Avalanche, who are a really good team.
Exactly.
That's.
But who could crack the Canucks?
Yeah. So, and that's I don't know enough about these prospects to say, but I will say, like, Colorado, like, just looking at the defense that's not already in, like, on the NHL team, like Justin Barron, Nathan Clerman, Roland McKeon, Jordan Gross, they're all righties. They're all righty defensemen.
And we need right defensemen.
And they need righty defenseman defensive help very quickly.
Desperately.
There's not nearly as many at, like, the NHL level for them, like on right D. Like, obviously it's guys who they'd never trade in a million years, like Makar, like Erik Johnson, like like Sam Girard.
Like all those guys are like,
maybe you could
starters.
You don't have $5 million to Sam Girard.
Sammy G is a great player, but we do not have the money for him, and Colorado would want a lot more than just Jaroslav Halak for him.
Right. I mean, maybe that comes part of the bigger deal. Like, maybe in a theory, like, you start with like a Halak Francouz thing, but like in theory, maybe like I'm not saying like for Girard specifically, but like one of the younger guys, like younger blue chip prospects, maybe it builds into something bigger that
you trade like prospect for prospect or something like that.
Yeah, something like that.
Or like an older guy, because the Avalanche are a lot closer than the Canucks for winning a Stanley Cup. They've been scratching at the door. Yes, but they've been scratching at the door for a few years now. And I think they're at the part where, like you said, they're more all in than Vegas, because they're like, we want this. Because like you said, they have a lot of guys who have like expiring contracts, and they're not going to be able to sign them all. And a lot of these guys like Johnson and stuff are getting older.
They're closer to the end of their window than Vegas is.
Exactly. Because Vegas is more built on young guys, whereas Colorado has a lot of like late 20s, early 30s guys, where those guys are gonna like hit the end of their prime very, very soon.
And then there's also the whole thing of like, in 2 years, Nathan McKinnon's incredibly team-friendly contract comes up, and once you have to renegotiate that,
that's going to be a struggle.
You're going to be in a lot tougher of a cap situation, so you might as well go for it now, kind of thing.
Exactly.
But again, like in those two cases, it's a case of if you let it get to the trade deadline, it's going to be too late.
Oh, 100%.
I mean, at that point, really, here's the thing. At that point, they've already paid out the performance bonus with Halak. That's already triggered.
Because he'll 100%.
I don't know if necessarily, like, I don't know what the rules are in particular. Like, if you trade him after you've hit the 10 mark, does it still count on your cap, or has it as long as it's put into the trade deal? Can you still trade that? Like, I don't know. Yeah. But like, we'll say I'm arguing from the sense of like, I would say that you kind of have to already make the deal early anyway in this case, because there's going to be more goalie options available closer to March. Mm-hmm. So I think your best bet is you try and talk to both of these teams now while it's still early. And you get that deal done now before it's like gets to be too late in the year and more goalies are available. I think you could. Yeah. I easily think Vegas and Colorado are the two teams that you should be looking at. I've heard Nashville, I think, as well. But I'm very much on like the train of like, I think Nashville knows that they're kind of in like house money kind of situation.
Yeah, whereas Vegas and Colorado more have money to move, especially Colorado.
They do have $10 million in cap space, the Predators, but I don't think that. I think they're using that as a point of like, we don't want to get rid of anybody, right?
That's more of signing players.
That's more of signing players, and that's more of a, if we are all in, we're gonna go in and get somebody big, like, you know.
Yeah, where we can like afford to lose, like we don't have to trade as many people to like take on a bigger contract.
Exactly. I think for that, like, I think that just about wraps it up for this episode. Was there anything else we should mention before we get out of here today?
I don't think so. I think that was pretty much everything with the Halak thing. When is the trade deadline? Because I'm not 100% sure.
I believe it's in March.
Or like early March?
It's either in, no, I believe it's either in late March or early April.
Okay, so there's a lot of time. However, they still need to think about getting it done soon.
Yeah.
Especially with that bonus thing hanging over their head and only 2 more games to go before it takes effect.
Yeah. That's pretty much where they are at right now. And they've got lots of time to figure that out because they're not playing games. So they'll have lots of time. They have a little bit of extra time to kind of figure out where they want to go.
And Jim Rutherford has more time to like kind of make deals and kind of propose things and such.
Yeah, and get a feel for what
they can get. And also talk to Halak too, because like you said, he has that no move clause, so he has to approve anything that happens.
Yeah, I think Halak is just in a position where it's like he wants to go to, if he's gonna go anywhere, if he's gonna waive the no trade, it's gonna be to a team that's going to either gonna win a cup
or very close to,
or like is either close, like, yeah, they're a cup contender. Or maybe there's a shot that he moves to a team that's just going to give him a lot of games, but I don't think that, like, I think he wants to win a
cup. So then, if he wins a cup, he retires.
I would be stunned if Jaro Halak waived his no trade to go to like Arizona
or the Oilers. They were
gonna get, well, not even there. Like, I would say like, you know, like Arizona, where they 100% need a goaltender, Jaro Halak would be an instant upgrade on everything they have.
Yeah, he would literally play every game.
He would literally play every game, but is he going to do that to go lose a bunch of games for the Coyotes?
Yeah, no, because the Coyotes have no depth in front of them whatsoever.
Yeah, why would you do that? Why would you waste the rest of your season playing on a bad team for no reason, just because you're going to play a lot, right?
Exactly.
Like, no, if he's going to waive, it's going to be to a team that's really good in a position, in a situation that he feels is most beneficial to him. And right now, based on what teams need and what teams like, it's a case of like, if like in Halak's case, right? Like, he's not going to waive as likely. I would say he's not as likely to waive for a team where it's like they've already got a very clearly set situation where he's going to play just as little games here as he is, because he's on pace to play, I think, the least amount of games in the last however many years, like even less than last year where he played 56. In the shortened season, he played only 18 games this year. In an 82, he might only play that same number, right? For the Canucks. So, like, it's a case of like you send him to a team like Colorado, like Vegas, where their goaltending hasn't been as superb, and they might be more likely to go to him on a regular basis just to see what he can do and what he can do with their defense. So I think that's a case where he's going to waive. Like, he would waive for Vegas. He would waive for Colorado. Yeah. He might not waive for a team like Edmonton.
And thinking about it too, like with the trade, like obviously we'd get their backup back and then maybe another player, probably another player. And that backup, like, yeah, like you said, like both teams haven't had good goaltending all year, but we also have Ian Clark, who is one of the best goaltending coaches in the league. And so you can think about that as well and think maybe that will help whoever comes in.
Yeah. I mean,
it's hard for this season, but like say they do stay, that could be something looking at down the road.
Yeah, I think in Vancouver's case, it's mostly just about making sure you've got room for next year because there's going to be like Brock Besser's contract coming up. Like there's going to be more.
There's
like,
a few contracts I think coming up,
and you have goaltenders in your pipeline long term. Like I don't think they even like. I think any goaltender they're bringing in this trade is just the. All right, he'll do
for the rest
now.
of the season.
Because again, like you don't have to make the playoffs for this year to be a success the way it's going. Like it just has to be like, okay, we clearly improved. We clearly moved out a bunch of money to prepare for next year when the team's going to be probably a lot better. And that's what you're worrying about. Like any trade for the now is not a good call. Like you've got to look at like trades for what's going to help you long term, what's going to help you in next year rather than the end of this year in the last 20 games.
Where that other player in that trade comes in?
Yeah, that's where potentially getting.
Where's the goaltender is just putting a Band-Aid over like what they need right now.
It's just a small it's just a small
like just a piece of the puzzle they need right now that they can easily replace with another one.
Yeah, easily. Exactly.